This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity Podcast. Today we've got 7 stories for you, 6 or 7 stories for you that we're covering, that we're watching closely. Let me start with, and we'll go through sort of inflation, corporate defaults, Novak, Djokovic, big companies by sales, big by market cap, and a lot more. So bear with me. The first thing is the Consumer Price Index came out today, and it rose a little bit more than expected in August. And this would seem like bad news for Fed fund rate watchers or Fed Reserve rate watchers. But the increase in inflation was mostly due to oil and energy prices up to about $90 a barrel. And that's good news for Fed watchers because core inflation itself slowed down some. So CPI, the CPI, which is the overriding number, went up on an annualized basis by 3.7%, and that's a bad number because it was 3.2% annualized in July. But the core index, when you strip out food and energy, slowed down to 4.3% annualized, and that's a good number. So stocks are responding to that well today with the understanding that the Fed may not raise rates at their September meeting. That's becoming an expectation. We'll see how that goes. The second story we're following today is about corporate defaults. Corporate defaults, those that are defaulting on their debt, has risen to its highest level since 2009. And this is a very frightening number. And this goes to this point of there's only so much the Fed can raise rates in attempting to slow down inflation without wreaking tremendous havoc on the economy. There are just so many businesses, so many homeowners, so many people that have too much debt, including the United States. And if the cost of debt goes up too much, it just makes cash flow just impossible. You can do all the EBITDA calculations you want, but if you don't have cash flow and can't make your debt payments, it doesn't work. And finance costs have become so high that they're really starting to squeeze companies, the government, and consumers. Again, as we say often, debt kills families, nations, and companies. This is a scary note that we're seeing the highest level of corporate defaults in nearly 13 or 14 years or so. That's a scary, scary note. The third story also touches on what is going on with energy prices. The airlines are starting to be hit by energy prices again. Crude oil prices up to about $90 a barrel, and that sort of is an indicator of all the energy prices, jet fuel and everything else. And you've got American Airlines, Spirit Airlines, and other airlines starting to cut their expectations of profits, and that's causing some dent as well. So you look at things that can really squeeze companies. Energy prices being up and finance costs being up cause tremendous havoc for companies. The fourth thing I'll talk about, I had the great pleasure of, with Chloe and Liz and my nephew Jake and his fiancée Rachel, going to the U.S. Open Sunday and watching Novak Djokovic play against Daniil Medvedev. And what's amazing to watch in person, and I'm a tennis player by background, by God, not a very good tennis player, but have coached some, have played some, and so forth. So you look at a player like Djokovic and you think, what can you learn from watching Novak Djokovic play? And I ultimately came away with the conclusion that he's such on a different level of player that it's almost like me looking at Michael Jordan and saying, what can I learn from watching Michael Jordan play basketball? And I almost come away with the conclusion that the real conclusion is almost absolutely nothing. They're just such a totally different being in terms of mental toughness, physical fitness, skill with the racket, that I almost look at it as though we're playing completely different sports at just obviously completely different levels. But what can I learn from it? Can I emulate his fitness by going gluten-free? Can I emulate his mental toughness by doing all the mindfulness things that he does? Can I emulate his athletic talent? No. So it's really challenging when you look at this and think, what inspiration can you take from it? It's at the very best, I could be a middle-aged player, a billion times less talent than him, and even if I did all the things he does, and I can't, in terms of fitness and mindset and everything else, which I'm just incapable of doing, quite frankly, I do come away with the conclusion, watching Novak Djokovic, they're playing a completely different game. It's almost like they're in outer space and I'm here, and they're at a totally different level. So what can I learn from it? I think almost nothing. The fifth story today is, what are the 5 largest companies by market cap in the U.S.? And each of these have taken a bit of a dive in the market cap recently. But the top 5 are Apple, then Microsoft, Google Alphabet, which continues to print money, Amazon 4th, and Tesla 5th. Amazing what Elon Musk has done with Tesla. You could love him, you could hate him, but it's amazing what he has done. And then we've got the 6th largest companies by sales. And I always love watching these numbers. I think he gave a speech to the Denver Medical Study Group on healthcare trends. And what's fascinating to me is, of the top 6 largest companies by sales in the U.S., 2 of those are huge payers. And I'll talk about that in a second. But the top 6 by market sales, by revenues in the U.S., Walmart number 1, Amazon number 2, ExxonMobil number 3, Apple number 4. And again, Apple's number 4 in revenues, but its profitability is so good and its prospects are so good, it's number 1 in market cap. Then 5th is United Health Group, and 6th is CVS Health, which of course are 2 of the big payers. United Health Group's gotten way ahead of the game in terms of being a huge provider network as well. And then CVS Health, both a payer and a retail pharmacy, trying to figure out how to restructure itself currently. Not in default by any shape, doing great, but it's stock down about 30% this year. In any event, those are several of the stories we're following today. Inflation news, corporate default news, airlines taking it on the chin a little bit with fuel costs going up, Novak Djokovic is playing from a different level, the 5 largest companies by market cap, the 6 largest by revenues. Thank you for listening to this today on the Becker Private Equity Podcast.